Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pastoral Thoughts podcast, and welcome today to this Father's Day episode with my father, Tim Young. And so I appreciate Dad being on the podcast today. And thanks for being on, Dad.
Well, it's good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
And, of course, Dad is in the ministry and has been serving the Lord since he got saved at the age of 22. And I got to follow in his footsteps, and it's nice to not only have a father but also a mentor in the ministry. And I saw just Dad's life being patterned before me just as a kid. And the big deal in the ministry for Dad, I believe it wasn't just about the ministry and being a pastor, but the Lord himself was a big deal in our home, and everything was centered around the Lord. And so as soon as I got saved, it didn't take me very long. It wasn't like I felt like I could pastor, but I was drawn into the pastorate. And I'm very, very thankful to have someone to pattern what being a pastor looks like in front of me. And so not only do I have a dad and a father who loves the Lord, but also I have a mentor in the ministry. So I'm thankful for my dad in very many different ways. And we are coming up on Father's Day. And so we're going to talk about being a father today.
Well, okay, let's do that.
Okay.
I happen to be one. You
I
too?
have a question for you, because we'll talk, fatherhood has to do with heritage, and everybody has a heritage.
Right.
And some have a goodly heritage and some do not. But nonetheless, you named in 1980 Heritage Baptist Church, gave the name Heritage. And there is some other Heritage Baptist churches out there, but not a lot, not a very common name, I would say, among Baptist churches. So what inspired you to name the church Heritage Baptist?
Well, what caught my attention was reading the Psalms one day and read the 16th Psalm. And this is well before even knowing to start a church or anything, and I saw I have a goodly heritage, it says, referring to the fact of his background and so forth. And I thought that'd be a great church's name, Heritage Baptist Church, just simply because it has the idea of those that have gone on before us. And as a result, now having been around there for 41 years, just to see the people and see their kids and, grow up and see their kids. It's funny, there's teenagers that were in the church or even younger than teenagers now that have grandchildren. That they were kids coming to church when I first started the church. So it's just kind of amazing. Yeah. So you like that kind of a heritage.
Amen.
And we have a new family that had gotten saved and baptized and joined the church not long ago. And they started meeting some of the people and then realized that so many of them were related to one another.
Yeah, yeah.
And so at first they're like, wow, so it's just a family church. And I said, well, if you think about it, they married within the church. And they stayed in church. That's not a bad thing.
No,
that's a good thing.
And that is my desire as a pastor, to have a multi-generational church. And so last Memorial Day here, was it last week? It was Memorial Day, wasn't it? Yeah. Week from last Monday. So right. Heritage Baptist was singing at in Marion at the cemetery. And so there is a lot of people my age who grew up in that church, and they all have children. And they have received a heritage. And so the church has lived up to its name. And, that would be my desire as a pastor. My dream is just to have a multi-generational church where, you see kids be born, they stay there. I mean, people are going to move, away, and you are going to lose a certain percent of young kids, unfortunately, to the world. But I'd like to see, just a family. And like to see how the kids grow up and marry each other and stay in church.
It's such a strange thing to people. That's why this gentleman was saying to me, he said, wow, everybody's related to one another, though it's a bad thing. And I helped him understand it's a good thing. That means that they married within the church. And so
and it definitely isn't stagnant. I was talking to Andrew, my brother, your son, and he said, I was there at Heritage on Sunday night. He's like, man, it was like probably 120 people there. And I said, I don't think I knew half of them. Of course, Andrew's moved to Buffalo. Probably he's been there for 6 or 7 years, something like that, at least.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And so the church is still growing, but you still have that multi-generational
He's probably been
facet.
there longer than that, 10 years, I think.
Oh,
he's
yeah,
worked for
maybe.
Tim. So
yeah, maybe.
I think Logan was born there.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
And he's going to be 10.
So it's definitely not stagnant at all, but
Right.
there is that contingent that grew up in the church, they stay in the church, they get married a lot of times inside the church, and just stay with it. And so there is a heritage, there is a lineage passed down, and you think of the impact that has on a community like Palmyra and Marion. That area over there is just a group of several hundred people that are just serving the Lord from 1980 onward.
Yeah,
and so that's a great thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a blessing, and then still seeing new families coming in and new generations coming in and stuff like that. That's always, and we always think about that in church growth and building, to have new people, but we oftentimes have forgotten the idea that these kids that have grown up under us, it's like having bus routes and picking up kids and being seemingly more tuned towards them than you are your own kids.
Right.
Can be, it could be misleading because we just assume our kids are going to make it, but they don't all make it.
No.
So we always have to be mindful to be concerned with them. So, yeah, a goodly heritage.
Right.
I have a goodly heritage was the theme, and that's actually...
The heritage has to do with legacy.
Right.
And legacy goes from generation to generation. And, I explain legacy when you get a deep snow, the first person down the sidewalk leaves a little trail, and the second one makes it a little deeper, and the third, before you know it, you have a rut, you have a path way to follow. And so the kids, let's say if they get backslidden and they fall away from the trail, they know where the path is. They have a path to get back on.
They can find the trail because there is one. Yeah. No, that's so true. I just think thinking about heritage, it's amazing the amount of things that I've learned about my heritage in the young family. Of course, your grandmother, my mom, she'll celebrate her 100th birthday this year. And fortunately, with that comes a lot of understanding about those that went on before us. We can reach back a few generations, and I was mentioning to you this morning that I have one of these, I don't know what it is, silver-plated pictures of my grandfather, who was born in 1876. And it's this picture of him and his best friend, and I had a lifelong friend that my dad was named after, but John Young, my grandfather, was a believer, and his father, George Young, was born in the 1840s. We find out then that he served in a church. He shared the gospel with people. He helped grow a church and everything, and something's written about him, and I never knew that. I didn't know that for, I don't know how many years of my life, probably my Christian life, probably 20 years, 30 years before I found out that, I do have a goodly heritage. There's people back in my lineage.
It's not like we hold a covenant theology where we think the parents are going to say, therefore the children are going to get saved. But there is definitely something to be said from Scripture that God is going to bless your progeny, your offspring, if you serve the Lord, at least to the third and fourth generation. That's from one. So if the second generation picks up the mantle and goes with it, so you're a blessing to me. I could stray from that, and it might jump and skip a generation to the third and fourth generation. But if I pick up the mantle, now there's a principle, at least, if not a promise, to the third and fourth generation. I was talking to Pastor Bruce Craig. He was on, and his father was not saved. His mother was saved, if I remember the story correctly. I believe his father got saved later on in life, but he can trace Baptists in his family all the way back to Scotland, and there was a Craig who was a Baptist preacher who was friends with John Knox.
Oh, no kidding.
And that's one of his ancestors. And so there is something to be said about standing for the faith that is going to directly bless your family immediate and then your offspring for generations to come.
Yeah. And it's best, obviously, in the responsibility of fatherhood. And mine was, simply, I guess by accident, not understanding, because I did not have that instruction I had a good family, I had a good mom and good dad.
And there was a Christian ethic.
Yeah, ethic as
So
far
there
as
was
that.
a God consciousness
Right.
in the home.
Yeah, and there was a desire, I know, in my mom and dad that, they had 5 kids. Did have 6, but the oldest one passed away before the rest of them came on board, and then there were 5 of us, and at one time they were probably all close to teenagers. So they were kind of close together. But there was always that atmosphere that it was family-oriented. Now, that doesn't mean we didn't have our disagreements, but even to this day, we interact with one another as family, where you see some families where they won't have any time for their siblings and whatnot. But I think it was handed down.
And you did grow up in church, and I believe a lot of the greatest generation, they did have a God conscience.
Right.
They did go to church, even if it was just checking a box, and that was their social outlet on Sunday morning, but things about God were being said from the pulpit, so they gave some sort of a tribute to God. But then with the young family, one of the fascinating things, I think, is that all the children, now Grandma's 99, but all the children are getting up into their 70s now. Paul's the youngest. He's 65, something
He'll be 66 this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're all married to the
first wives.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all have...
Or husband, husband,
we have a sister,
And so
she was married the longest so far, but yes, all of them.
Yeah, so that, they're all going to be, if they live, they're all coming up on their 50th anniversaries.
Well, Sue's probably she was married in 68, so she's had 53 wedding anniversaries, and then Jeff was next, and then Marianne and I.
And so you only stay,
Paul and Dawn,
you only stay married when there's the loyalty, fidelity to the home, to the family, and that was just portrayed in your generation. And then I say too, like Grandpa didn't get saved till later on in life, but like as soon as Grandma received Christ, she just was all in.
Yeah, got involved. Well, and the fact is they were married for 48 and a half years, so there was never really a consideration in our generation for divorce.
Right.
It wasn't a concept. I'm not saying that none of them ever mentioned it.
Right.
But it passed, and so that I think that's a good heritage right there, and goes back some generations where there was a fidelity and there was a faithfulness and a continuance of a marriage.
And so, your grandfather on the Young side, what was his name?
John.
So John was saved, and then his father here, George Young, and if you're watching this, I'm going to hold it up. I don't know how good you can see that, but Mom and Dad put this together for me a little while back. And here is a commendation at his funeral from his church. And I'll read this because it's just amazing. So resolution on the death of George W. Young, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, April 23rd, 1920. So April 23rd, 1920, this is his funeral, and this is the resolution by his church. Was that on the original resolution?
What?
Psalm 16:6.
I don't know.
If it was, that would be pretty amazing, because Psalm 16:6 is on this, and I don't know if
well, I have to look at it.
Perhaps Mom had. I do over there too, and
do you have a copy of the original?
Well, it's a copy of the copy,
right?
But
okay.
But this is something that's typed up and reproduced with George Young's
I have
picture
no idea.
on it. So the verse Psalm 16:16 is on this, and that'd be interesting if that was the same. If that was on the resolution, and then you use that to name the Baptist church. So the lines are fallen unto me in pleasant places, yea, I have a goodly heritage, Psalm 16:6. To the session. So this is a resolution. Your committee appointed to prepare suitable resolution upon the death of George W. Young submits the following. Whereas God in his wisdom has seen fit to call George W. Young in the midst of active service in the church on earth to the larger life in the church triumphant. Whereas that we hereby record our heartfelt appreciation of his invaluable service as a Christian man, his untiring efforts and loyalty as a teacher of the women's Bible class, which he organized, and his willingness to love and serve his master and his church in whatsoever he was called. He was faithful in all things, and is faithful to his duty is a shining example to us. We shall miss his earnest prayers at the midweek service as well as in Sabbath school. We shall miss him at the preaching service from which he was rarely absent. His great love for the church in which he worked over 30 years, and of which he was a charter member, and untiring interest in the saving of souls together with his years of experience made his counsel invaluable. He will be missed in every organization of the church, especially by the members of his class in which he was teaching at the time he was stricken with illness that proved fatal 3 days later. We direct them for comfort in their loss to the God whom he loved and whom he served to the last. We feel that he has fought a good fight, he has finished his course, and kept the faith. Henceforth he has received the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give at that day. We feel his loss keenly, but we know his wish would be that we take up the work he so much loved with renewed vigor, and be the same never-failing inspiration to officers, teachers, and scholars that he was. Therefore be it resolved that Calvary Church, the Calvary Sabbath School, the Calvary Young People Society of Christian Endeavor extend their sincere sympathy to the members of his family in their sadness, and be it further resolved that a copy of these resolutions shall be spread upon the proper record of the church, and that a copy be sent to the members of his family. And so I can't imagine a greater commendation given to anybody than what was given to George Young, just a faithful member of his church.
And that's amazing, because growing up, I had no knowledge of the fact of the salvation or my ancestry as far as my father's grandfather or my father's father, who I knew. He was 84 years old when he died in 1961, and I knew him for 10 years and still remember him. But when I did get saved, I wrote to my aunt, who was a school teacher, never married, and she lived with her father, which is John Young. And when I got saved, I wrote her a letter telling her that I'd gotten saved. I didn't use that vernacular because I didn't know whether she even understood that. Mm-hmm. But she wrote back to me and said, yes. She said I was saved, and I can't remember. I think she was 13 or 14 years old when she got saved. And in my letter, I'd asked if Gramp had been saved, and he said, oh, yes. She said, I can still remember looking over his white head, meaning his hair color, as he read the Bible every evening. And she said, yeah, he definitely knew the Lord. And when she passed, I got her Bible. I was the resident religious receiver, right, of all the family.
It's a Bible. Give it to Tim.
Yeah, give it to Tim. He needs another one, But actually in her Bible, in the Flyleaf Bible, was the plan of salvation written out on how to get saved, so she could actually take it and show it to somebody. Yeah. And it had written out, you need to know you're a sinner, you need to and so forth. It was all written out. Still have the Bible. Yeah. And so she definitely knew the gospel.
Yeah, but then evangelicals. Yeah.
Yeah. And then actually reaching back to, as you just mentioned, as far as George would be my great grandfather, born in 46 or 49. And him being interested in getting the gospel.
And we don't know what was going on in the generation before him or the generation before.
Exactly. No.
And so you imagine a man who was sold out like that, there's a strong possibility he was raised in a godly home.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And certainly in that day and age, obviously, the Lord had a great deal more influence on a lot of homes than he does presently in that way. But I don't know. I think maybe having that put together, we threw that verse in there, but that'd be something if it was,
Yeah, we'll look. Verse. We'll look when the podcast is over.
Oh, okay, that's
next
good.
year. We'll give an update on the Father's Day podcast.
But the thing is that I think with the idea of fatherhood, most of us go into it having no idea what's happening and what's going on most of the time. You can read books about how to father, and sometimes they can be good, but I think so much is the idea of staying close to the Lord, because I think as a result, it overcomes a lot of evil.
Right.
Just by having that desire to follow the Lord. So when it came to parenting, I mean, I never had any instructions as far as being a dad, or nor my wife being the mother and so forth. Everything was passed down from a previous generation. Right. My dad enjoyed spending time with his boys. He had 4 of them, and we went hunting, we went fishing, hiking, and everything else. And it's that's what I knew growing up, and that's what we experienced while you and Andrew were growing up.
And you had fatherhood pattern to you, and
and
so it wasn't something that you had to reinvent, but it's something that you learned subconsciously.
Yeah. Now, some people that didn't have that, I think it's imperative that they have to be more conscious of what fatherhood is.
And I think it could go one or two ways, because I consider myself that I've come from a good home. So what the temptation is for me is just to rely upon my flesh, and not go to the Bible to reinvent my parenting.
Right.
And so you can see somebody that come from a bad home. I think of Robin Shaver.
Yeah.
And just terrible background. I mean, I've heard Ken Shaver talk about it freely from the pulpit, so I'm sure she didn't mind me saying that. But I mean, she's a great mother.
Yeah.
Great parent, and I think what happens is she just had to go back and look at Scripture and look at other women of God, and then just,
she was on her own at 16 years old or something.
Right, yeah.
Like
parents
15.
Essentially said, get out of here.
She worked and paid her rent and everything else, and she was still in high school.
Yeah.
And it can be done.
Yeah.
And if you don't know exactly what to do, there's ways you can find out, certainly the Lord, but following examples.
Right. And so the temptation is for, someone who considers themselves coming from a good home, that we would just rely upon the flesh and not upon the Spirit of God like we should. And then if you come from a home that's terrible, you don't use that as an excuse, just, I can't help it. But you can reinvent yourself is from the Word of God, and from, you get godly mentors and parents of your own. And I think there is a principle in the Bible, that Paul teaches to young Timothy. He says, the same that you've heard among me, among many witnesses. Now Paul was a father to Timothy, calls my son in the faith. He says the same, commit thou to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. So if you grew up without a father, you can say, well, who are my father figures? Well, you get to choose your fathers, and choose those men, those Apostle Pauls, and then who are my children, either physical or spiritual children, that I will mentor, that I'll father. But I thought of something when you were talking, is parenting. There's no, if you could sum up the direct instruction for parents in the Bible, and we could read those verses, and it'd take us a good solid 30 seconds or something, or a little bit longer.
Maybe a little longer.
So there's a lot of principles in the Bible, but it's not, there's not a solid instruction manual, page after page, do this in the morning, do this in the afternoon.
Right.
But I heard about a child psychologist who, for his master's thesis, wrote the 5 laws of parenting. Then he got married and had 5 kids. When they're toddlers, he revisited his work in the next production. The next printing of his book, his thesis, was 5 principles. Then they got a little bit older, pre-adolescent, and it was 5 thoughts.
On parenting, yeah.
And then when they became teenagers, it was, I have no idea how to parent.
No, that's true. You have to hang on. But I think there's some foundational stuff that people oftentimes don't give credit to, and that's getting to church, get your kids in church, and have a right attitude about church. Enjoy it. Enjoy the preaching and the teaching. I think that's one. The other is having God in your home.
Right.
Rather than just say, we punched the clock last Sunday, and we went to church Sunday, and that's the Christianity will.
And I think it almost does damage to a child about the matter of God when you lock God up unto Sunday morning.
And you go visit them.
Right.
Yeah.
And then also, like, with Christian school or even homeschool, you think, wow, they have to memorize verses for their homeschool. But, if you're not talking about them and it's not real and you're not, because kids, it doesn't matter what you say, it's where you put the emphasis.
It's the example, yeah.
So if God's a big deal to you, naturally, there's always a few black sheep in any family, but naturally, your children are going to follow your example. And I believe that's why Lydia was told in Acts, and then also the Philippian jailer, that you shall be saved and your house.
Yeah, your house, yeah.
Because they figure that the leader of the home, if they choose Christ, that the rest of the home is going to follow suit.
Right.
And
yeah, it's critical in marrying, choosing a marriage. It's funny because when I go to the jail and we're just getting retrained to be able to go back in there, post-COVID. And, I do many times the ladies' church service on Saturday night and then the men's on Sunday morning. And a lot of times with the ladies having been there, and some of them were residents for some time, or they'd come back for a postgraduate course, I call it.
Yes.
And I would say to them, how many belong to the She-Woman Men's Haters Club? And several of them would raise their hand, they hate men, because they did this to them and that. And I said, well, who picked them for you? And then they get real sheepish because they picked them for themselves.
Yes.
And I said, well, it sounds like you need to get a better picker and find somebody. And the whole challenge was to try to help them understand that building a life and a home, and I'd say, how many of you had children? And, 70% would raise their hand.
Sure.
The children.
Sure.
Here was mom in jail.
Yes, and got children,
and
young children,
yeah,
most of the time.
They would pick some fella that obviously was self-centered and selfish, and so were they as well, but that fathered a child, but they don't have a father.
No, yeah, and that is what is missing in those women's lives. And you read about statistics, and then also from prison, most of the 80% of the men in prison, something like this. I'm just guessing, but I guarantee it's close if you Googled it. They grew up without fathers. Of the men who are in prison, 80%.
Right.
And you need a father and you need a mother in the home, or a father-mother figure in the home. I think the wonderful thing and the miraculous thing about the local New Testament church, that if you are a single parent, bring them to church. And if there's not a mother figure there that are in the home, you will find one in church. If there's not a father figure in the home, you will find one in church. And you can have spiritual fathers, and I think the Lord will fill in that gap. But yeah,
there's no doubt. We have, as you do probably as well, single mother or mothers that they're the only ones that are saved. The husband's not saved, and the husband's really not involved much in what's going on. But I feel bad when they think that they don't fit in because it's expected for them to have a husband. They're trying to raise children by themselves. And they couldn't find a better place to find a male example. Somebody loves the Lord.
Right.
And I'll just interject this with that same thought. A lot of times when we come to education, we think everybody can read it out of a book, or everybody can do it, an extension class somewhere. But, a lot of times the personality of the teacher has a tremendous influence on the pupil. Yeah. Their excitement for the subject matter, their personal testimony of different things. So sometimes there needs to be that model or that example. And so you take a child and put them in Sunday school, and they got a teacher, and hopefully they love the Lord, and they've spent their time preparing themselves and with the Lord that week. And that has a powerful influence on a child that maybe doesn't have a dad.
Absolutely. And I can say, my wife and I have been married for 20 years, but we bring our kids to church on Sunday morning. Their teacher's name is Karen, and Karen does an amazing job with my kids. She's just she's a tough Italian woman. She wouldn't mind me telling you that, but man, she drills those kids and tells them her opinion on things and really strong convictions. And I was talking to a visitor that had put their girls in the class for the first time, and they were blown away by the stuff that she was saying or whatever. And I said, man, she's done our kid a lot of good. She really has. And so the church can play a big role in that. Now, I think of guys without fathers, and you can go one or two directions. I was talking to R.B. Alette. He's going to be at our church next week for Father's Day.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah,
he's going to
yeah.
be at our church in August.
Okay, yeah. So he's here for Father's Day, and he was telling me last time he was here. He said, I was talking to John Jenkins, and he said, John Jenkins and I both had good fathers, and he said, Clarence Sexton. His father was an alcoholic, and he
Left the family
card
and somebody,
shark
yeah.
and everything like that, and just was a gambler. And so was Jerry Falwell's father. Jerry Falwell's father was like a bootlegger and things like this.
Oh, wow.
Jack Hiles grew up without a father.
Yeah.
J. Frank Norris grew up with a drunkard father, and he said, I guess that means that you and I, John Jenkins,
gonna make it.
we're just going to be average. We're just going to be ordinary.
Yeah.
So it's like those trials in life, those vacancies. Either you can stumble over that, or you can use that as a catalyst just for personal growth. I was reading something. There was this rock star named Tom Petty, and he died a few years ago in his 70s, but he had all sorts of platinum records and everything. So there was someone from Geffen Records, and he said that a good rock star is going to have one or two things. He said they're either going to have a father who rejected them, or they're going to have a mother who left them. He said with Tom Petty, his mother died when he was 6. And then he had a father who rejected him, so he was a really good rock star. and you'll see this like with Madeline Murray O'Hare and a lot of other atheists of renown. Mm-hmm. The ultimate thing is they really hated God because of
what happened to them.
Yeah, with their father figure.
Yeah, that's people. It is so tough for them. I'm talking about people that are up in years, my age, older. They still reflect back on the fact
their
of their father or mother, or that they're missing something in their life, and it all stems with that. Keep that in mind, listener. It's not a matter of just say, well, they'll be fine. I have them sometime, and she has them sometime, and everything. The rest of their life will be affected by that. And you say, well, maybe they'll excel. But there'll always be a void there in their life. Always.
And they're trying to please a father who is not there. I love Winston Churchill, reading about him. I just read a good book by Eric Larson. It's called The Splendid and the Vile. And it was Winston Churchill's leadership just for 1 year during the bombing of London. And he wrote like 10,000 words a day or some ridiculous thing. And then he led his country through the great crisis of World War II. But his father, Lord Randolph Churchill, just abandoned him, put him in a boarding school. Lord Randolph would go and speak across the street from where Winston was in school and not walk across the street
to see him,
to visit Winston.
Yeah.
And so when he was prime minister, he would sit underneath the picture of Lord Randolph Churchill, and he would cry and say, I wish Lord Randolph was here to see this. And so even after his dad was dead,
and he was an older man,
Dad died of syphilis, from fooling around. And even when he's an old man, he's still trying to please his absentee father.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It has a profound effect. Kids that have a broken home, and I'm not saying that it's happened, it's over, or whatever the case may be, but you have to pick up those pieces. And going back to the idea of father, and as you said, you got to get to church, you got to be around people, and you have to be careful too, because there are people, and like you said, pull your guard down when you're in Christian school, pull guard down when you're around church people or camp or whatever, because you also have to protect them still, because there are bad influences.
Absolutely.
in there. Last night in our midweek service, I'm doing on the message of Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, and it comes to the place where you have heard, thou shalt not commit adultery. And then Jesus, he draws applications to it. You even think on it, in your mind, look on to lust after. You've committed adultery. And we're living in a day and age. So I made mention last night, girls, don't let these men hug you unless it's your dad or it's some relative that you want. I said, now I had a creepy great uncle. And all the women in the family were a little leery of him. Yeah, weird, you know. And
everybody's got that weird uncle. Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, and I just said, keep your you fellas, keep your hands, you know, off of these girls. Why don't I said, why don't you hug their mother first, then hug them?
Right.
I said, we don't do that. You take these teenagers and young men. Now, whether people like it or not, I have no concern. Historically, Christians have behaved like that. I don't mean hugging, not hugging.
Yeah.
Not putting your hands on somebody else's child or whatever the case may be. And nowadays, we think, oh, it's so much a wonderful Christian. No, because normally those people aren't really involved in doing anything for the ministry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know, I've said this before, just like there's dirty cops, you know, and the rest of them get the flack from it. There's dirty preachers.
Oh, yeah.
And also...
Or dirty laymen, too.
Right. And I've no more dirty laymen than I have dirty preachers.
Right.
And there's perverts in society, and perverts go to church.
Right.
So, yeah, always have your guard up. And I think also that's... another thing is important that, you know, if you go to a church and it's like, because there's some churches that are like all-encompassing campuses. I mean, you got, you know, cradle to the grave. You know, you got some churches even have a cemetery that you're placed in.
Yeah, right.
And so sometimes believers think that when they're on the campus, everything is like, let the guard down, everything is safe. I think that's one of the reasons why the number one responsibility of a parent, Deuteronomy 6 or Deuteronomy chapter number 8, is that you teach your kids diligently about the things of God, and your kids need to know that if they go to Christian school, that they need to have their guard up against sinners and wicked people. Now, if you sent them to public school, you tell them that automatically.
Yeah, right.
And but you know, they're going to church. Have your guard up. Be thinking about this stuff.
Yeah, I think in my age, of course, you're still rearing your children. I think now in my age with my kids reared and so forth, and I have to watch my grandchildren being reared, and I have to make sure I stay out of the business of my kids and doing their responsibility, unless there's some advice or, you know, concerning a situation. But I guess I have now having children that are reared, I have a greater father type spirit than I did then, because I think life was going on and you didn't think about it. But now,
it's so quick and there's so much stuff, and you were building a church at the time, and you know, and
it comes at you too fast, and you got kids and decisions making. But now looking at it, I have a greater burden as with a father like spirit towards the kids.
Don't you think if you want to shake the world for God, I mean, take a few children and pour your life into them?
Oh yeah, I mean. The very fact that down the road
versus the masses, the multitudes.
Then it's about us. Then it's a one generation situation. But when you put things in, I think you know, I'm thinking of a couple people. I think of Mark Bushy, a missionary for many years now, the head of the missions department at First Baptist Church in Hammond, doing a great job. He and his dear wife. I think of Rich Hack, who's been pastoring probably close to 30 years, came out of our church, and then. Even now, right now, I have one young lady that just went to Indiana to interview for a Christian school position, and 2 weeks ago, and then this last weekend went down to North Carolina to interview. She's going to probably choose one of them when she leaves. I mean, you planted a seed. Now you talk about the different
and there's
people.
many others.
Yeah, many others that are like that. To me, it's like, you know, I don't want to say more concerned, but I am concerned that, for example, this young lady gets in a place that the pastor will take care of her, you know, and, you know, be a father type, not image to her, but the fact is be concerned about her as a father.
And if you go through the Gospels, you see that the majority, I couldn't tell you what percent, I knew at one time, of Jesus speaking is to his disciples. Yeah. 12, and one of them was the devil.
You're right.
So, I mean, he poured his life and then turned the world upside down by pouring his life into 12 men.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I think that's so true. I think the idea of, I don't know when it all started, but the thing is where people try to build these empires and kingdoms, and it's all about them. And when that person dies, it's kind of like God died.
And
Let me tell you something. God hadn't.
Right, and it fizzles in one generation. And that's another thing, too, that I believe about building a multi-generational church, that the foundation and people's relationship would be built on the Word of God and Lord Jesus Christ, so that, if I drop dead of a heart attack and fall, the church is going to be going on strong because it wasn't built on me and my charisma. And
well, even if here's our liability in the 21st century, is the building is kind of our church. But we're building people, and sometimes churches have split over a building. That's my church. I've been going there 30 years. Even if somebody comes in with a destructive nature, and people decide, hey, I got to go find a church that teaches the Bible,
they're going to be going on forever.
They're going to go on.
It's kind of like first century.
Right.
You had, 15, 20,000 Christians or something in Jerusalem, and the Lord sends Paul in there or Saul at the time.
Saul, yeah.
Okay, kick them all out. And really, the Lord planted them throughout the empire so that when Paul went on his missionary journeys, they already had a little Christian foundation.
Yeah.
All scattered all around. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So I think let's not build buildings. Let's build people. And when you build people, they'll last longer than buildings will.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the Bible says that no flesh will glory in my presence. And so we think that our name, Solomon says that these rich men think their name's going to go on forever. It's not. People are going to forget who you are, but who cares? We're not propagating our name. We're propagating the name of Christ.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's true. And I think there's a lot of fathers out there who got saved later in life, or they didn't know when they were rearing their children, and their hearts are heavy. I think if anything, that's where prayer comes in. And not ever giving up. If there's life, there's hope. And
Amen.
Allow your life to be an example now, and
Absolutely.
then learn to say,
you're still living a legacy.
Yeah, and even if you go to them and the kids, you got saved later, and your kids are grown, and everything. I don't mean go there and hang on their ankles or whatever. But the thing is go there and say, you know what, I'm sorry. I didn't realize my responsibility when you kids were growing up, and I realized the Lord's revealed it to me, and I just want to let you know that I'm sorry for not being what I could have been and should have been for the Lord at that time. And at least you're setting the ground rules for what the future is.
You gave them your testimony. Now live your testimony.
Right.
And die your testimony, and then even maybe perhaps after your death, of like, you know what, they get saved, and then they had that pattern laid before them, which was vitally important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've got a few quotes here. It's pretty good stuff. So here's from Charles Haddon Spurgeon. In case you never heard of him, you better look him up because you need it. He says, schoolmasters are well enough, but godly fathers are both by order, nature, and grace the best instructors of their sons, nor can they delegate the sacred duty. When fathers are tongue-tied religiously, need they wonder if their children's hearts remain sin-tied? Religious conversation need not be dull.
Right.
And the Prince of Preachers, Charles Haddon Spurgeon, who started his ministry just as a teenager, had a godly legacy, and he was able to be a child prodigy because he lived with his grandfather, preacher, for a while. His father was a preacher. And here he says the conversations with fathers on religious matters is irreplaceable.
Right. Yeah, they're going to hear it at church. They're going to hear it in Sunday school. It's like I always say at the church. Visitors expect the pastor to be friendly, but they're really shocked when the church is friendly.
Right.
And you expect to hear about God at church. But the thing is if you hear about God Monday through Saturday, it just is reinforced,
Yeah.
And people are shocked.
Yeah, absolutely.
People talk about it. I mean, if somebody found out today that there's a family next door that reads the Bible every night after the meal or in the morning, they have a devotion, they have no idea what that is. They may even mock it as far as that.
No.
But the thing is that there was a time where even the unsaved read their Bible, knew their Bible.
Absolutely.
And, they always gave reference to the Almighty.
Yes. And, Benjamin Franklin talks about, in his autobiography, about the Great Revival, the Great Awakening that was happening at the time. Benjamin Franklin was not a believer. I don't think that he was ever saved. I think he respected God, which a lot of our founders did, even if they weren't believers. He was friends with George Whitefield, the great evangelist, but he said that in Boston where he lived, he said you couldn't walk past one single house without hearing people singing hymns together.
Yeah, I mean, that's, we have no idea, and I only come from, I'll be 70 in a few weeks, but the fact is that I remember people going to church. Now, I don't remember people having devotions or, singing hymns and whatnot like that, but that's an amazing testimony of a nation.
So it was going on in the homes, the cottage Bible studies, cottage prayer meetings, among families. Here's another quote from Martin Lloyd-Jones, and he's considered by many the prince of preachers of the 1900s. There's a great documentary about him. If you have Amazon Prime, it's free. And he had 2 daughters, and his daughters prayed. Daughters were believers. Great father, amazing guy. If you read his biography, he said this. We should give our children the impression that the most wonderful thing in the world is Christianity, and that there is nothing in life comparable to being a Christian. And that's so true. Like, you think of George Young, I could care less. So that would be my 2 greats, great.
Yeah, it'd be your great.
Yeah, great-great-grandfather.
He'd be my great.
I mean, I could care less what he did for a living. I mean, if he was a trash collector or whatever, that would be absolutely fine with me. But the accolade from his local New Testament church is, to me, I mean, that's as good as being king.
Yeah.
Right there. So, Martin Lloyd, he said, the best thing we could ever do for our children is make Christianity the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah. I've got the newspaper article of his death, George Young's, in 1920. It was cut out of the paper, and I have it at home. And it indicates the fact for the last 10 years prior to his death, and while he, at that time when he died, he was a court crier. That's what they referred to him as a court crier.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly what
a court crier is. Whatever that is.
I don't know whether he said hear ye, or
the honorable judge so and so.
Yeah, exactly.
All rise.
Yeah, that may have been what it is. Now maybe that's something I have to figure out or find out. But the thing is really it doesn't make any difference. It's the heritage and legacy he left.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here I have another quote. This is the other end of the spectrum. So I gave you a quote from Charles Haddon Spurgeon, Martin Lloyd-Jones, and here is from the other end of the spectrum, former president who wrote his autobiography entitled Dreams of My Father. Mm-hmm. So remember that this president, Barack Obama, had an absentee father that had absolutely nothing to do with him. And so even after his father's death, what he's trying to do, trajects him all the way into the presidency. He's trying to please the dead father. Mm-hmm. So here is something that he said June 15th, 2008. He had a Father's Day speech at the Apostolic Church of God in Chicago. He says this: if we are honest with ourselves, we'll admit that what too many fathers also are missing from too many lives and too many homes. They abandon their responsibilities, acting like boys instead of men. And the foundation of our families are weaker because of it. You and I know how true this is in the African American community. We know that more than half of all African American children live in single-parent households, a number that has doubled and doubled since we were children. We know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. They are more likely to have behavioral problems or run away from home or become teenage parents themselves. And the foundation of our community are weaker because of it. We also need families to raise our children. We need fathers to realize the responsibility, that the responsibility does not end at conception. We need them to realize that what makes you a man is not the ability to have a child. It's the courage to raise one.
Yeah, well, that's amazing coming from that source. But he obviously, like you said, he missed his father, and he's even, like you said, wrote a book bringing him up.
And this is almost a speech of lament.
Yeah,
because he is mourning the loss of his father.
Right.
who was politically, let's say, I mean, he wasn't on my particular side, your side, but a great man politically as far as his ideology, communist ideology.
Yeah, great for them, man.
But it completely abandoned his son. And here his son later on in life, after his father's dead, still trying to please the old man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he ended up spending more time with his grandparents.
Right.
Than he did in Hawaii, than he did his parents as far as that. So he had an emptiness in there, and so he probably could be influenced anyway, which he was. The wrong way, obviously. But, yeah, that's amazing that you have that.
Yeah.
And the thing is hindsight's always 20/20. That's true. But the thing is that what you had to have is premature nostalgia. In other words, look back, nostalgia is looking back over your life. Premature nostalgia is looking at how you will feel at the end of something.
I'll tell you something funny I saw a documentary the other day. It's about money and how people they don't picture themselves as old, and so they don't save for retirement.
Yeah.
So they had this computer program and a lot of people, I think you could do it on the social media outlets and stuff. I've never done it, but you take a picture of yourself and put it in this program, and it shows you what you're going to look like when you're 70 or 75. Oh, wow, yeah. And so it says when you see a picture of your older self, you'll be more empathetic towards your older self, and you're more likely to save money.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you could picture yourself as you have grown children who actually love you.
Yeah.
You better be nice to your kids because they're going to pick out your nursing home type thing. You change their diapers and you want them to take care of you when you're incapacitated as well. So you'd have to see yourself as older and see yourself as your relation.
And that's that premature nostalgia. See what you will wish you had done.
Yeah.
When you get there, because everybody's going to get there. But that's interesting having a program. They got a program for everything. So
I know.
But to show you what you're going to look like when you're 70 or 80 or whatever.
Yes, I have one more quote. Now we're going to wrap it up. But here's General Douglas MacArthur, and amazing man. I mean, old soldiers never die; they just fade away.
Yeah.
He was very close to insurrection himself against Harry Truman, and amazing guy, amazing leader, interesting fella, another interesting character in history. But he said this. He said, "When I am gone, I do not want to be remembered as a great general. I want to be remembered as a great father who read his Bible and prayed for his children."
That's something. Yeah. We're always looking for the lights, and today we're living in the world of heroes.
Yeah. There's a gal who writes really good books, and I know that you really like her books. Doris Kearns Goodwin. Yeah. She worked for Lyndon Baines Johnson, and she wrote his official autobiography. She gives a TED Talk. You can look it up and watch it on YouTube. It's about 20 minutes. Well, all TED Talks are 20 minutes or less. But she talks about a three-legged stool. And she said how that Lyndon Baines Johnson just lived and was totally consumed by politics. And that how when his life in politics was over, his life was over.
He died, yeah.
And, he didn't have a relationship to his children. He had his own private lake and property down there in Texas. But, she said, your career, your hobby, your family. And that was her interpretation of it. But a lot of times with men, we can get wrapped up in the identity of our workplace or whatever. If your name was General Douglas MacArthur, he has some perspective here. I couldn't tell you. You'd have to ask his children how good a father he was in all actuality. But he had a perspective there that, now I want to be remembered by my family. Mm-hmm. And to tell you the truth, that's really the only people who are going to remember you. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO or whatever.
Yeah, 100 years from now, nobody knows.
No. And when you're laying on your back staring up at the lights, who's going to be there?
Yeah.
When you're breathing your last and doop.
What is going to be most important?
Doop. Who's going to be in that room with you?
Right.
When they're watching your, heartbeat there. It's going to be your family I mean, that's what you want to be there
The
anyway.
ones that were third on your list.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's true. The thing is it's a blessing to be a dad. It sounds like a scary thing, but it's a great blessing if you look at it from the perspective that the children are a gift from God and that they'll return to Him one day, and you know that you want to leave some memories that they'll be strengthened by.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, Dad, what's your little daily devotional called? Something in troublesome times.
Yeah, it's a daily devotion. We have it on our website,
and it's on Facebook too, isn't it?
You know, I don't know. I just do them, and I send them to whomever, and they take care of them.
I think it's called Comfort in Troublesome Times or something like that. Yeah. And
I don't know.
But look it up, Heritage Baptist Church on Facebook or on the internet, and that should come up. And I know like a lot of people on I like hardly ever get on Facebook, not because I'm spiritual. I just don't like it. You know, right. And but I know a lot of people really, really like those.
Well,
so you're gonna have to keep them going.
Yeah, I know that I think we're a number. We started in COVID, but I think we're like around 377 of them.
Wow.
We do it 6 days a week, and I take a scripture and just talk about it within 3 to 7 minutes and shut her down. And it's just a little devotion.
Yeah, but people look at it, so I love it. So yeah, look it up and subscribe to it. I'm sure that you'll enjoy that very much. But yeah, we'll leave it there. Thanks for being on today.
Well, my blessing.
All right. God bless you, each and every one of you. Thank you so much today for watching this podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Also, if you'd like to reach out to us by way of email, you can email us at pastoralthoughtsmail@gmail.com. And if you'd like to, I do write a blog, and you can subscribe to that at pastorjack.org. Thank you, God bless you, and have a great day.